not dead. Is it recording or no?
Yeah.
Now it's right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're gonna talk about factoring, and this is a very simple stuff. Procedure-wise factoring, remember that one separate sheet of paper I want you to write all the rules that is relevant for helping you on SAT. Now I want you to add one more rule is when they talk about factoring, GCF first, okay? So factoring, GCF first. So if anytime you want to factor something, you should think about GCF, greatest common factor. Okay, always think about greatest common factor. So adding one more rule for your notes is when it comes factoring, always think about GCF factoring first. Okay? So what I mean by that is this. I have factoring, so and the first thing of GCF, first thing about factoring, when you think about factoring something, always GCF. So GCF factoring. What I mean by GCF factoring is this. I have a 6 x squared minus 12x. I say I want to factor this. So what can I factor out here?
6x.
6, good. What else?
X.
X, right? So both, right? Because they both have x, and they both have 6, right? So once I factor out a 6 and x, well, basically there's two things here, because there's two terms here, right? Some people just write down the one term here, and which just doesn't make sense. But there's two terms here. There's a minus sign in between. So 6x times what equal to 6x squared?
X.
It has to be x, right? So 6x times what equal to 12x?
2.
2. Right? So that's called GCF factoring. Do you guys know this? Okay, let's try a different one. Let's say if I have 12 x y to the third minus 3x squared y, something like this. What can I factor out here? 3 is one of the things you can factor out.
And X.
And x.
And the Y.
And a y. Do you guys see that?
Yeah.
They both have what? X. But I don't take out a square because this one doesn't have x squared, right?
Yeah.
And they both have y, but I don't take out y to the third, I take out y. And they both have element of 3 as a constant. So then I will factor out a 3, x, and y. Now here's the hard part, is the middle part is negative sign. 3xy times what value equal to 12xy to the cube?
4. 4 Y to the second. 4Y.
4y second?
Yeah.
Good. What's your name?
G.
Jing, good job. He's a new student, by the way. He's from Freedom. Cool.
Good job, G.
We don't like Freedom kids.
Yeah. We'll make an exception for you.
Yeah.
I don't like freedom.
There you go. Now we like you.
Now you like me.
No, I'm just kidding. Okay. So we take out 3xy. So what do we have left here?
X.
Just x, right? And that's it. That's your GCF factor. So GCF factoring, just factor out greatest common factor. Now, one more thing you need to know is this. So this tiny thing is, so if it's a negative leading coefficient, so negative leading coefficient, so make sure you factor out negative leading coefficient as well. Leading coefficient. So factor out negative leading coefficient. Why are you going to factor out negative leading coefficient? For example, if I have negative 2x to the 3 plus 4x, what do I factor out here?
2X.
2x is good, but we just addressed that we need to factor out negative leading coefficients.
Negative 2X.
right? We want to factor out negative leading coefficient. So factor out negative leading coefficients. Okay, so in this case, this is negative, so we want to factor out a negative. 2, they both have x. Factor out, it's going to be x squared. What is it? Minus 2, right? That's it. He's like, oh yeah, I got this. I can do this all day long. Now, it just remind me, those are SAT questions. I kind of want to point out. So we're going to write down SAT practice right here. Let's see if you guys can figure out. Okay, so if x times y is equal to 7, x minus y is equal to 5. Find x squared y minus y squared x. It's not equal to a number. This is SAT questions. Huh?
No, they be posting posts like this on Instagram.
Today?
I don't know, it's like
Oh, probably. So this is actual SAT questions from the past. And the question says x, y equal to 7, x minus y equal to 5. And they say find x squared y minus y squared x. I told you it's equal to a number, but you gotta figure out what that number is. Anybody can figure out? If you figure out, raise your hand, don't shout it because other people might want to try it too. If you can figure out, raise your hand. Nobody? Don't just wait for me to go over stuff. Think. SAT you gotta take individually. You're not gonna take it with a teacher. So why did I go over something first before I ask you those questions? Do you see the relevance or no? Sai? You got it?
I think here.
People say you're good at SAT.
Who?
Some people say you're good at SAT.
Is it Moynac?
Probably not.
Really not. 400. Right on the PST. Did that make it? Oh wait, 300? Never mind. I said 1300.
So how many of you guys figure out? You're writing your names 200.
You're almost there, bro.
You're writing your names 200.
You probably spelled your name wrong, bro.
Okay? So xy equal to 7, x minus y equal to 5. What is x squared y minus y squared x? Nobody? Oh boy. What'd you get?
I got 35.
Yes. You should have stayed in this class.
Nice one.
You should have stayed in this class. What is the GCF here?
X
X and Y, right? And when you factor out, what do you get?
X minus 1.
What is X, Y?
7 and then in the parentheses it'd be 5.
Oh,
That makes a lot more sense now.
I thought that was the wrong answer. Yeah.
So I say you guys got this, but you guys didn't. It was a very simple question. Just factor out the GCF. When you look at something, factor out.
Yeah, I didn't want to answer.
Please stay. Don't leave. It's super easy. It's not hard. It's a simple question like this that just trip people up left and right.
Let's do another.
Huh?
Let's do another one.
Oh, we'll find another one. I'll give it to you. Okay. So tomorrow I'll find the one. So that's the GCF. It's not hard. You just look at x squared y, y squared x. That's why I go over this before I go over this. And then you say, okay, well, I can rewrite this in a way that maybe they ask me something. So SAT, they'll ask you, they will tell you a clue, and they will say, hey, can you do something about it? So clue are this, right? This is the clue number 1, clue number 2, and this is clue number 3. But this one you had to make sure it's somewhat related to those two. Then you just have to say, well, I mean, if I were to factor out x, y, then x, y is right here, factor out, boom, 7 times 5, 35, done. Next question. So why do people stuck in the SAT question for 3 minutes, 4 minutes? No, this one's 10-second questions. Literally 10 seconds. It should not spend more than 10 seconds and just move on, go to the next question. Okay, so that is the GCF. Most of you guys don't see that. Now, what's the next thing? Well, sometimes you can have multiple GCF in the factoring. So here's a question about factoring in terms of GCF has multiple different things. So one of the first thing is factoring 4 terms polynomial. So 4 terms polynomial. So 4 terms polynomial. Okay. 4 terms polynomial. This one is okay, well, what is 4 terms polynomial? So we're going to give you a question. It's a GCF factoring, and it's not difficult. So we're going to deal with this type of question a little bit. So 4 terms. Let's start with 4 terms. First, let's start with 2 terms, 4 terms. We can start with 4 terms. We can start with 4 terms. AB minus 6A. Okay. And then minus plus 2b minus 12. Plus 2b minus 12. And you say, hey, can I factor this? And yeah, of course you can factor this. This is a 4 term. So usually that means factor by grouping. Now there are other cases not factor by grouping. So if it's 4 term, usually 4 term factor by grouping. Now there are some 4 terms that we're going to learn later. It's not factor by grouping. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a parenthesis on the first 2 term and the last 2 term. So put parenthesis on first 2 term and last 2 term. So we're going to put a parenthesis like this. Are we okay here? And we're going to parenthesis like this. Now be careful how I parenthesis this. This is not mathematically correct to parenthesis this way. But I usually parenthesis right between the letter and the sign here. The reason I'm doing that is going to help me solve different type of problem, factoring different type of question. So what we'll do is we're going to factor out something called GCF. What is the GCF between AB and minus 6A? A. Boom. Are we okay here? What's the 2b minus 12?
2.
Boom. Done. And then you say, okay, am I done here? No, not entirely. There's addition sign here. It's between 2 terms. There is still a GCF. What is GCF in this case? They both have what?
E minus
So this and this is GCF, right? GCF. So they both have b minus 6. Can I take out b minus 6 on both terms?
Yeah.
Boom. That's a factor. Okay. I'm going to ask you to try different questions.
Yes.
So here's my questions first. My first question is x to the fifth, x to the third, x to the third, plus 5x squared, plus 3x, plus 15. And that's my first one. I want to ask you that. The second one, I want to ask you this. X squared, y squared, plus 3y squared, minus 5x squared, minus 15. And the third one is going to be p, and we're going to do xy. xy plus 3x minus y minus 3. So there are 4 questions here involved with that. Start with this one. X to the fifth plus 5x squared plus 3x plus 15. Can you factor out GCF? Well, it's a 4-term polynomial. More likely factor by grouping. Now, what are those 4 terms? What do you have to do? Jaden, can you see all the way in the back? Y'all move to the front. Oh, you got it. You can move to the front. I think there's some empty seats here. And there's more people's gonna drop out. Is that the Chinese guy over there?
What?
You gonna stay with me?
I try to get out somewhere.
Who's your guidance counselor?
This way. You know, calling a racist doesn't really work.
You did try that?
No, I just played it in my mind.
Okay, so what do? Parenthesis first 2 term and parenthesis last 2 term, right? Did you do that?
Yes.
Okay, Adriana, can you tell me what you factor out of the first 2 term?
I have a factor, I just put the parentheses.
Okay, so
I got you right here.
yes,
I
over there.
figured out x2,
X squared.
yeah, x squared,
What do you have left?
x plus 5.
Yeah, so x squared times what equal to x to the third, so it has to be x, right? X squared times what equal to 5x squared? Well, am I going too fast? Yes.
You can't put x squared inside the parentheses and then on the outside just have x?
No, because the GCF means they both have in common. They not only have a common as x, it's greatest common factor, not just common factor. Common factor is x, but the greatest, that means they both have something to the 2nd degrees. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Are we okay here? Then what do I factor out here?
3.
3, so we're gonna plus 3 here, and then that's gonna be what? X?
Plus 15.
X plus 5.
5, because 3 times this equal to 3x, 3 times 5 is equal to 15. So what's GCF here?
X plus 5.
X plus 5. And then once you factor out, it's gonna be x squared plus 3. 2 more. Yeah, you got the next one? Lenny?
For the first one,
Uh-huh.
you can do y squared.
Y squared?
Yeah,
Good.
y squared.
So y squared, and what do you factor out? What do you have?
X squared plus 3.
Perfect. And you got parenthesis here. What do you factor out here?
You can factor out -5.
Perfect, because this is negative, right? Leading coefficient is negative. Factor out -5, and then that's gonna give you x.
Squared plus 3. Oh, plus 3.
Yeah. So now it's gonna be x squared plus 3. Good job, Lenny. Y squared minus 5. That's awesome. The next one's a little bit tricky though. Anybody got a next one?
I got
Okay, so can you tell me what the first two parentheses here, what do we factor out here? X, and that's gonna be y plus 3, and what do you factor out here?
Negative 1.
Perfect, this is negative, right? But it's still negative 1, right? Can I factor out negative 1? Oh, that's plus, and then it's y plus 3 is equal to x minus 1. Question about this part?
No, sir.
One more rule for that special sheet of paper is this one. It's called difference of a square.
Remember the other sheet?
Yeah. One more rule, difference of square. What is difference square? It's an a squared minus b squared. So this is called a perfect square. Square. And this is a perfect square. And the minus sign is also another thing term in math. It's called difference. So difference of two perfect square. So difference, which is a minus sign, of a perfect square. This one's equal to a plus b times a minus b. Okay, so when you go to one example, x squared minus 25. The easy one is this. It's gonna be, this is a perfect square, this is a perfect square, it's just square root of both. It's gonna be x plus 5 times x minus 5. We're gonna go through more detail tomorrow.
You got homework, right?
Huh?
You got homework, right?
You got your homework, yeah.